last presenter of the day. Obviously, you needed to go last, you needed to be first, you needed to be last. Brett today is going to talk about the Griffin Tax Clinic and the impact that it has on our clients.
What I'm going to be speaking about is the Griffin Tax Clinic, and the reason why Melissa's name's there because she's one of the co-academic supervisors, and we've also got Ben Kristen here. What I want to talk about is the client experience, and this really relates to what Thea's been talking about, what Vin's been talking about, and I love the idea that we need more tax disputes to get a better tax system, and because part of the problem with the tax system is the imbalance of power between taxpayers and the ATO, and even, sometimes the ATO doesn't realise how big and ugly it is, and not all taxpayers are equal. And you see that with defamation cases in the sense that a lot of defamation law is when newspapers or large companies bring action or rich people bring action. If you're poor, you can't afford the legal system. And so I think that is a really important thing to reflect upon. So just, what the tax clinics are is when basically it's, university students providing free tax assistance to vulnerable members of the community under supervision. And so at Griffith, we had a registered tax agent, Colin Perryman, who supervises our student cohorts. And that's part of, we opened in July 2019, and we've been operating now for 3 years. We've got more federal funding, so we can operate for another 2.5 years so far. And that's part of the National Tax Clinic program. And we have myself and Melissa, Colin, and also Kristen, I should add Ben's in terms of our office managers. So we've had past students step up and help be the office managers of the tax clinic. And then we have our student tax advisors who come from either business degrees or law degrees or a combination of that. And they can do it as a working integrated learning course as part of their degree, or they can volunteer. Most of our students now do it as a course. And we operate every trimester during the year, which has a trimester mode. And so basically we operate each of the teaching weeks, and so we operate all year round and close for exams and uni holidays. So the activities is that we provide assistance to clients in terms of cleaning tax returns, advising on proposed business activities, advocating on behalf of clients in terms of their dealings with the ATO, and also dealing with objections and that. And so the main idea is that the students are leading these advice under supervision, and that in part provides more access to the clients in the sense they don't feel as intimidated. Going to see an accountant is intimidating. Talking to the tax office is really intimidating. A lot of the clients, part of their feeling of comfort is that they feel like they're helping the students learn, and so they feel more open to actually sharing their stories and that. We've got low-income individuals, recent migrants is a huge part, recovering drug addicts, and people on NDIS, people returning to work, and those operating a micro business. And part of the federal government's funding was that they wanted this assistance to be available to small businesses. I think politically, that's because doing something for small business is good, but more and more with the rise of the gig economy, particularly recent migrants, a lot of them actually are forced to run their own business because finding traditional employment is hard. You imagine English is your second language, and then you have to deal with Australia's tax law, Australia's regulatory laws, on top of that, how difficult that can be. And the elderly, Stuart Roberts, described these to be people that falls through the cracks. And when we initially started, or when COVID started the first tax clinic, when it initially started, a lot of accountants would go, oh my God, you're going to steal our clients. Generally, our clients are not profitable for accounting firms in the sense that, even though they might be individuals, their issues are complex in terms that can be their own issues in terms of dealing with that, but also, in terms of what they're actually dealing with. That's some of the data in terms of, the number of clients and that we've seen. But I think, and this is where sometimes the data, numbers, can be useful, but I think it's the actual stories behind the clients that can actually be more insightful. So I just want to, and thank you, Kristen and Ben, for collating these stories. we've got one where we've got, due to COVID-19, the downfall of certain industry, many individuals ended up with multiple jobs. And so we had a client who was a low income earner who started working with multiple employers, but then also started her own business. She had no idea in terms of running a business, had no knowledge about the tax obligations, let alone about how to manage cash flow, like what Melissa discussed, and also the regulatory obligations. And so she needed assistance in lodging her tax returns, but also advice how to manage her tax affairs, maintain appropriate records, what deductions were claimable, and she was actually unaware of the records she needed to keep. And so, in her words, the tax clinic provided her with the knowledge, information, and understanding to manage her multiple income streams, and highly recommend their services. We've got another taxpayer. He was basically, his home in Victoria was destroyed by fire. He was going to move, drove up to Queensland. Unfortunately, COVID was happening and the borders were shut, and you're only allowed to cross the border if you actually had a registered address in Queensland. Because he was moving, he actually had a home in Queensland, and so he was stuck in his car at the Queensland border. And he was reaching out for help, but a lot of the government services now, unless you're up to date with your tax returns, you're not actually eligible. And so he had outstanding tax returns, prevented him from being able to access social security payments. And on top of this, his car broke down and he was entirely stuck in his situation. He contacted the Griffin Tax Clinic. Okay, we're able to get him up to date with his tax returns, even if he received a small refund. And with that small refund, he was able to get his car fixed. And he felt, he felt an extent of relief in terms of actually getting control of his life. He was able to find employment, stable housing, and 2 years later, when we contacted him recently, he's finally living in Queensland. He's managed a home that offers accommodation to vulnerable. He actually manages a home now to offer accommodation to vulnerable people, and he's actually prepared his own tax return for 2021. And so you can see how you don't believe what an issue tax can become for people in terms of that, particularly when it's multiple years. And we also had an Indigenous elder who was always looking after his own community, but due to illness and separation, he basically hadn't done 20 years of tax returns. And basically, once it gets to that extent, you just put your head in the sand. We were able to work with him over 2 years, 2.5 years. Still 3, yeah. And he's been managed to lodge about 15 of those 20 years, up to 20 years of tax returns now. And he's been able to get a small refund. And just the person that he's using that actually to now do more community programs with his, First Nations people that he works with. And it just shows how you can actually have a positive impact on people's lives. And it's amazing. I don't think you realise how, for certain segments of the community, tax is really scary, and tax can be really foreboding, and how it can impact so much. You think about going for a home loan. If you don't have your tax returns up to date, you're unlikely to be able to even be considered in terms of a home loan. So one of the things that, in terms of tax attitude, there's a high satisfaction in terms of clients. So we do an end of survey to our clients. So we've nearly had about 100 clients out of the 500 meetings complete this survey. It's optional. That high satisfaction would recommend to others. Not as strong, but still some indication is that, the blue and the yellow strongly agree that, the tax clinics assisted them in terms of being more tax compliant, improve their knowledge in terms of tax, and empower them to take charge of their tax affairs. And I think in terms of, we get, their funding is organised through the ATO, and one of the things, this is where, with their federal funding, you kind of have to provide data and that, but I think part of the data that's nearly impossible to capture is actually assisting the ATO, because even for the ATO, these people aren't worth auditing in terms of, the amount of tax revenue at risk, but, it's so important in terms of tax compliance and actually assisting people in terms of that. And also giving them a better attitude towards an empowerment to actually be compliant in the future. Also, a big part, I think, of what we've been able to achieve is make them feel less anxious about their tax returns and their tax position. Not as strong those in terms of, understanding, how tax affects their total financial position, which is that top line. And still, not too bad in terms of how it's, improve their overall financial well-being. In terms of improving their confidence, those first indicators is self-efficacy measures and their general self-efficacy measures. And what to me that tells me, this is on a 5-point scale, is that generally our clients don't feel the confidence, general confidence in their life. They're low in terms of general confidence. And that probably reflects their vulnerable backgrounds that they come from. But when we ask questions in terms of tax-specific things, what's really strong is that they feel more confident about how to keep proper records for tax. And that's a really important part, because as been pointed out, the onus is on the taxpayer. So you might actually have deductions, but if you don't have the records to back that up, technically you're not eligible for those. And also, they've got more confidence about seeking assistance in terms of tax issues. And when you think about Australia, tax is really hard. And there's a huge use of tax agent by Australians. But these people a lot of times would be too scared to initially seek advice from tax agent, even in terms of feeling intimidated, but also their cost. So if you can actually increase their confidence about seeking advice, that's a positive thing, I think. Also, what's quite strong is that they feel more confident about keeping up to date with their tax lodgements. They know what receipts are included in their taxable returns, and they have more confidence about what tax deductions they're entitled to. Okay, this is their self-reported confidence. Doesn't mean it's correct, but at least because I'll show you we've asked them some more tax literacy questions, you'll see that they may be a little bit overconfident in terms of what is deductible, but at least they're feeling good. Sometimes you just do need to feel good. The first, sorry, if I can get the theme to work. Big one. I don't want to press the big button, that looks scary. The third and fourth column, they're confident about managing their tax returns in the future and complete their own tax returns, not as strong as the other things. So they're still, going to the tax clinic 1 or 2 times to help is not going to cure everything. And so you can see that while they've got some more confidence about what is income and what's deduction, what records, about managing their tax returns in the future, there's still work to be done. But I think probably for a lot of taxpayers, that'd be the same. Also, about 1/3 of these clients are micro small businesses. Okay, so when you're running a business, there's a lot to get your head around in terms of that. In terms of tax literacy, so we asked them a number of tax and financial literacy questions. The yellow is incorrect. The green is correct. Okay. So the first 2 up there are general financial literacy questions that are generally asked in the ANZ Financial Literacy Survey. You see that in that first one about inflation, a lot, 43% of people got that wrong. They're stronger about, sorry, it's out of 80, so it's not percentage, so 50 out of 80 got the next one right. So their financial literacy is not that strong in terms of that. I haven't compared that to the general population. Sorry, I just thought about that would be useful. That's an inside voice. What is 2 measures that they asked from in terms of tax literacies, in terms of knowing that, tax deductions have to be connected to generating accessible income, and a speeding ticket while doing work is not tax deductible. So a lot of people got those questions right, which is good. Unfortunately, and I suppose again, CGT, most got that wrong. But that is consistent with Professor Tony Bracken's PhD research in terms of Australians' tax literacy. CGT was one of the things that most people got wrong. Also, most of the people got wrong about claiming tax deduction for clothing you wear at work, and about tips. That waiters receiving a tips, That's, generally that's just wishful thinking, the ATO won't know about that $5 tip I get. But, so I mean, what I think that demonstrates is that there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of people's literacy. And I think it'll be interesting to compare this to Tony's PhD, because she did general literacy in terms of the population, and to see how these measures measure up to the general population with that. Wait, that's fine. I know.
5 minutes.
Okay,
Just
well,
over 5 minutes.
we'll go straight to questions. So this is just a working paper, working slides at the moment, to be a paper and an article. We've published 2 other papers so far. They've been more focused on the student experience in terms of their self-efficacy. And one of the beautiful things of a pandemic is we were able to compare the students working at the clinic on campus compared to when we were fully online, and see how the learning was different. And what that study demonstrated is that international students and students without prior professional work experience really struggled when we ran the clinic fully online. And it kind of demonstrates that when you're fully online, certain demographics of your students will struggle. And like the students who had prior work experience, professional work, they really blossomed online. They probably took control more, okay, because they had the confidence in that. And this really demonstrates what's occurred educationally, I think, moving online, and how it can be potentially problematic, particularly for certain segments of our students. And then we've got a general description of the Griffin Tax Clinic in the journal. That's the other tax clinics also describe themselves there. Yeah, I think that really captures one of our clients in terms of, Luke and his colleague were extremely patient, very helpful. Sometimes you're spending an hour, 2 hours with these clients. If you're in a commercial practice, it'd be timesheets on the clock, how are we going to recover from this? And allowing that generosity of time, I think, is really important for the client, but also important for the students. I think one of the things I've learned over the last 3 years is how privileged I am in terms of a lot of people that we see. That gives you a new sense of being lucky, but also being able to give back in a positive way. And that's both for the students, but also for the clients. And I shall leave it there, and we can go to Q&A.